Hey guys, I'm here with Dr. Brad Schoenfeld. He just gave a presentation on hypertrophy, which is his area of expertise. He's probably the best person in the world when it comes to the research on muscle gain. So I want to talk to you today about training frequency for hypertrophy specifically. What does the research say today? I know you've done some research, meta-analyses, and so on and so forth. Give us a quick summary of what the best training frequency is for gaining muscle.
So, kind of in a nutshell, the overview there is not a best training frequency. That as a standalone variable, training frequency really doesn't have much of an effect on hypertrophy within certain limits, assuming that volume is equated. Now, there does seem to be a slight benefit to doing a 2-day, having training muscle groups twice a week versus 1 day a week. It seems to be more prevalent as you increase volume above per session volume above a certain point. So if you're training more than about 8 to 10 sets of a muscle per session, then it seems to really have a better benefit to splitting that up over 2 or more days. But as a standalone variable, frequency really is not much of a does not much of a factor in hypertrophy. However, if you are looking to increase volume, in my opinion, and there is some evidence of this in the literature, that increasing frequency can be used as a strategy to increase volume within a given week.
Right. So I know there was some research comparing body part splits versus full body training, and the research found that full body training was superior for hypertrophy. However, I believe you said that most of the participants at the time had been previously doing a body part split, so there might have been a novelty factor in switching over. So when you say that there might be a slight benefit to training twice a week, would you say that if you're going to do a body part split, maybe it's better to do a body part split but hit those muscles still twice a week? Can you do that?
Correct, yeah. So you can, how you go about creating the structure of a routine will be dependent on the person. So you could do a total body routine, let's say 3 days a week. You could do upper lower split, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. That'll allow you to get more volume within a given session time.
Right.
So if you're doing a 1 hour session 3 days a week, you could do 3 1 hour sessions, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You could do 4 1 hour sessions, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and get in more volume without training more time within a given session.
Right, okay, yes, that makes sense. Okay, so you mentioned the Norwegian Frequency Project, which I found very interesting, and I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, because what I saw was that the results of this study seemed to conflict with other existing research. So what did it say?
So the Norwegian Frequency Project, in a nutshell, took a group of trained powerlifters, highly trained powerlifters, split up their workout either 2 sets per muscle over 6 days a week per exercise versus 4 sets over 3 days a week. So the volume was equated, and they found much greater hypertrophy for the group that did the 6-day week, splitting it up more frequently. And actually, the group that did 3 days a week showed no growth on average. Now, the caveats to this, there's several caveats. Number one, the Norwegian Frequency Project was never published. So we really don't know the exact specifics of that routine and can't scrutinize the methods.
So we don't know the methodology or anything like that?
So we have a general idea of the methods, which I'll get to in a second, but we can't really scrutinize the specifics of the methods. Like, could there be issues within those methods? So here's what we do know. They used a powerlifting type routine. So they did squats, deadlifts, and bench press. And they did them way short of muscle failure. I had actually spoken to one of the researchers on the study, which is just not indicative of the way bodybuilders train. So if you're looking for a hypertrophy study, that would not be the model that you would use to study hypertrophy. That's number one. And number two, and importantly, I spoke to one of the researchers, as I said, and he told me that the powerlifters there train less frequently with more sets per muscle group per session for their hypertrophy training. He said they use that more as a model for their strength training. So again, we need to see more, but what I will say is that we've had several studies that have come out since, 2 in particular, one by our lab, our group, and none of them showed a benefit to a 6-day versus a 3-day training scheme.
Right, so it seems like that seems to be the exception.
That's the way I would interpret it.
The vast majority of the studies. Okay, and so I know you mentioned frequency in terms of frequency can help increase your overall volume. So would you say that training volume is perhaps more important factor in driving hypertrophy?
Well, I don't think there's much question to that extent that up to a certain point.
Right.
Like
It's
if you're
not
just
more,
doing,
it's always
you're just
better.
doing one set per week,
Right.
then we know that would be suboptimal. Now, how much volume is going to be specific to the individual, but there is a dose response, and we've shown that in meta-analyses. As you just said, it's not unlimited. So at a certain point, you're going to basically see an inverted U, and at a certain
Right.
point, the results will level off, and then if you keep doing more and more frequency, you would expect, this has not been well documented, but there'd be a negative effect beyond a certain point because of overtraining.
Right.
Where that comes out is really going to be specific to the individual,
Right.
and lifestyle factors, genetic factors, things like sleep, stress, nutrition. There's so many factors that are going to go into determining what each individual's optimal volume is.
Right. So I know for someone like me, I have my volume tolerance is actually fairly low, so I would need a lot more recovery time and fewer working sets per muscle group per week to feel recovered. Otherwise, I actually start to feel sick the next day. I wake up the next morning with almost flu-like symptoms if I do what would be a more normal training volume for someone else who's also very fit and has been training for a number of years. So what are some signs that someone is doing too much volume?
Well, first of all, the basic overtraining signs, some of the things you're talking about, flu-like symptoms, fatigue, lethargy, not wanting to go to the gym.
Right.
I mean, in extreme instances, you can look at increased resting heart rate, things like your testosterone to cortisol ratio, if you can take that. I think the biggest indicator, or certainly the most objective that you can look at, is reduced performance. So if you're seeing your general training loads are decreasing, now the problem with that is by the time you're seeing that, you're actually already overtrained. So you generally don't want to wait till that happens. You want to be more proactive and intuitive and try to head that off.
Right, so this goes to speak to why it's so important, and I always talk about this, so important to actually track your workouts, grab a training journal, log your loads and reps for every set that you perform, write down any comments about that particular session, you didn't sleep enough, you ate too much, or anything that might help you in future weeks when you can look back on previous training sessions to help you become a better trainee or just get better at your workouts.
Correct.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So practical takeaways from this? I'm hearing if you want to maximize hypertrophy, obviously make sure your nutrition, sleep, and everything is in check. With it, when it comes to training, you should probably train, hit a muscle group at least twice a week.
Correct.
Right.
I would say that
Probably twice a
on a general basis, 2 days a week. Now, there doesn't seem to be much benefit to more frequency.
Right, so more is not always better,
Correct.
again. And then when it comes to training volume, there's an inverted U-shaped curve, so more is not always going to be better, but there's going to be an optimal level of volume. What is the weekly number of sets? I know you mentioned this in the presentation for a muscle group per week that you just as a general recommendation.
So just to clarify, there is no optimal volume. There's just guidelines that we give. And my general sense of the literature, and also based on personal experience, is somewhere between 10 to 20 sets per muscle per week. Some people can do well with even less than that. Some people will need more. And there seems to be, at least from recent research that we've done, a suggestion that for really non-responsive muscle groups, so if you're, let's say your quads are non-responders, going up somewhat higher than that, maybe into the 30 set. But again, we're talking about over short periods of time, so I do want to emphasize, for me, looking at volume should not be one choice over the course of 52 weeks, but rather we should look to kind of waive it. And I think
so maybe you can do like a 4-week specialization or something
correct,
like that.
where you're really pushing your body. The body is the human body is very adaptive over short periods of time. It thrives when placed under great amounts of stress for short periods of time. And I like to use that as a model to say, hey, if we waive that you can ultimately achieve greater gains by having lower periods interspersed with higher periods. And that's kind of a basic periodization concept.
Right. Yeah, I like that. Okay, that's great. Brad, thank you so much for your time. Where can we find you on social media?
You can find me all
Very
over
active.
social media.
Yeah,
so you just
everywhere.
search my name. On Instagram, it's Brad Schoenfeld, PhD.
Yep.
I think it's just at Brad Schoenfeld, and Twitter, and just search for me on Facebook.
Yep, and if you go to ResearchGate and Google Scholar, you can find his research all over the place.